Steve Dorff, my guest this week, again, on the Boston Chris podcast, has written over 20 top 10 pop and country hits and is a 2018 inductee in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. That is why you should keep watching. Yeah.
It's time to jam. It's time to mingle. It's time to see what everyone's drinking. It's time to jam. It's time to mingle. It's time to see what everyone's drinking. Until we all lose connection.
Hey, y'all, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 39 of the Boston Chris podcast with me, Boston Chris. Who else would do the Boston Chris podcast except a guy named Boston Chris? I know. It makes perfect sense. It's fine. This is episode number 39, and the first multiple-time guest on the Boston Chris podcast is my friend, the Hall of Famer, Steve Dorff, who has written songs for everybody. Literally everybody. You have been affected by Steve Dorff every single day of your life, some way or shape or form. I promise you. And today we get to talk to him about a lot of things that we didn't get to discuss with Steve on the first go-round. It was so nice of him to give us another almost hour today to kind of touch on the things that I didn't get to talk to him about the first time, including Steve just got married, which is phenomenal news. Just congratulations to that, Steve. We also talked about and got into real depth about Snuff Garrett, who was his publisher in California, in LA, when he got out there for the first time in the mid-'70s. We really talk in depth about Snuff, the positives, the negatives, kind of the relationships he formed while he was under Snuff, why he left Snuff. Meeting and working with people like Roy Rogers and Merv Griffin from those years. We talked about his evolution process from going from New York to Atlanta to LA, and then even talked a little bit about his most recent move from LA to Nashville, how the internet has really helped him kind of become, where location doesn't matter quite as much anymore. We talked about the different instruments and how they affect the instrumentation of the music he produces, and how he knows what to put where, even though he doesn't play those instruments. We talked about his family. Again, we talked about Nashville and whether or not that gave him an advantage in country music, living outside of Nashville. We talked about movies that he wishes he would have written the score for, unexpected successes. We talked about Barbra Streisand, his current project with Bill Anderson, some future projects that are coming soon down the pipeline, which you guys are going to be excited about, and a lot more. Guys, let's get into it with Steve Dorff, the one and only, the Hall of Famer, the dozens of BMI awards. You guys, let's get into it.
Hey y'all, this is Scott Sean White, and thank you for tuning in to the Boston Chris Show.
Hey guys, it's part 2 with the legendary composer, songwriter, arranger, engineer, extraordinaire songwriter, especially Steve Dorff. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, man.
Hey, I appreciate your time again. You are the first person to be a 2-time guest on this specific podcast, so thank you for that.
Oh, wow. I'm honored.
So yeah, there was a lot of things that we really didn't get to talk about the first time that we talked to you. First, though, I'd be remiss without saying congratulations on getting married in the interim between episodes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's exciting, right?
Yeah.
How's it going so far? I know you guys have been together a while, so.
Yeah, it's going good. It's
Awesome.
going good. We're with the holidays coming up, we decided to postpone the honeymoon until the spring. So
yeah, that's probably smart anyway, right? With weather and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So the first thing I really wanted to talk about that we didn't get to discuss the first time is what I call the California story, or the coming to California story, because I find this to be very interesting with you, because your entire career was essentially shaped on one day in California on your last door that you knocked on. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, I had been, I had enough money to last me a week. I had traveled out there, uh, staying in the equivalent of a Motel 6. It was not very nice.
Mm.
And this was in 1974, I think. 75. Yes. And uh, and so I was just in awe of the place, and I had enough money to last me about a week, and I just went to every record producer's door I could think of, and um, left some demos. Tried to get in to see someone, but nobody would see me, and I knocked one of the doors I knocked on. Towards the end was Garrett Music. Snuff Garrett was a very happening producer at the time. He was doing Sonny and Cher, and I had done my homework. I went to see like Ted Glasser and Jerry Fuller and all the Jack Gold, and that's who I was trying to see because they were the producers that were cutting outside songs. And so I tried to get into Garrett Music, and this very nice man at the front desk said, "If you have anything, you can leave it, a tape or something." And I said, "Well, I was hoping maybe to see, to at least say hi and meet." And he said, "No, he's not here, and he's in the studio, and he really rarely does that. So just leave something." And I figured, oh well, I'm just gonna go home and with my tail tucked between my legs and consider this just a bad experience. And other than seeing Hollywood and doing a little sightseeing while I was out there, um, but I got back to my hotel, and my light in the hotel was ringing on the phone, and I went to pick it up, and it said, "You have a message," and it was a woman from Snuff Garrett's office saying, "Please give us a call." So of course I called right away. It was a little after 6 in the evening, so I figured nobody would be there. But this woman answered, and it was Snuff's assistant, and she said, "Snuff would very much like to meet you." And when can you do that? I said, "Well, I'm leaving. I'm heading back to Atlanta tomorrow." She said, "Well, can you come over now?"
Hmm.
And I just got in my rent a car, drove over there. It was like 7 o'clock when I got there. He worked late, I was later found out, and he had listened to one of my songs, asked me to play a few more on the piano for him, and said, "When can you get out here?" And he offered me a gig and offered to move me out with I had a 6-month-old baby, and it was just one of those serendipitous, you know, golden Midas touch moments
Which
that
have shaped your life and career so unbelievably. I feel like, reading your story, there's so many lucky moments and serendipitous things that happened to you over the years. Um,
yeah, but in talking to some of my colleagues over the years, and it has to happen to everybody.
mhm.
Whether you're a scriptwriter or an actor or a film writer or a director or a musician, a session player, aspiring to anything, you have to sometimes put yourself or find yourself in that moment when all the stars are going to line
Yeah, and you have to
line up.
create your own luck too at times too, right?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I always say my career has been based on number one, manifest destiny.
Hmm.
I've tried to create those opportunities for myself, and without even knowing how.
Hmm.
It's not like walking up to an artist, like walking up to Elvis or the Beatles and say, "Hey, will you cut my song?" I mean, that's just stupidity,
Yeah.
obviously. But somehow you put yourself on the playing field, and sooner or later you get a chance to touch the ball,
Right,
you know.
exactly. So this was a preemptive trip too, because you still had 6 months left on your deal in Atlanta. So there was a bit of red tape there from Snuff's side of things, where he had to work through your deal with Bill down there in Atlanta.
Yes.
As a young person at that time, did you realize kind of the limb that Snuff went out on for you at that point?
Yeah, I did. It was pretty incredible. I fulfilled my last 6 months with Lowry as a writer,
Right.
but I wanted to be in California because I wanted to arrange and produce and be in the scene, and because I knew those were the kinds of songs I was writing, and I just wasn't getting the traction uh, in Atlanta. It was limited for me,
And
and so I felt like, well, I'm just going to get on a bigger playing field here and see what can happen.
and of
And
course you had
and
that dream of film and TV as well, right? Yeah.
exactly, and I knew that's where I had to be. That was the right place for me.
Absolutely. I love that because in your book you kind of I love the chapter on Snuff, and we didn't get to talk about him really at all in the first episode. So I wanted to really touch on him quite heavily here. I love how in that chapter on Snuff, it's almost like a book in itself, where you're talking about the negatives and positives of what Snuff did for your career. Obviously, that last door knock completely changed the way Steve Dorff came to be. But at the same time, there were a lot of drawbacks to Snuff as well, just because of the way the business is and was.
Yeah.
And you signed a 3-year deal with him, and then another 10 years after that. So, did you feel some sense of loyalty to him, knowing that he went out on a limb for you, even though there was some drawbacks?
Absolutely, and he gave me all these amazing opportunities that you can only, you know, pray and hope for. I got to right away get into the studio and learn about recording in Los Angeles. I learned the great players. I started becoming friends with the great players. I started playing sessions and arranging sessions. So he gave me that opportunity. The drawbacks were, as I've written, and are pretty common knowledge, Snuff is a pretty controlling, or was a controlling person,
Hmm.
and he definitely put a harness on me in terms of certain things that I wanted to do and I was progressing towards, and he held me back from those things. So it was a real push and pull in terms of loyalty towards the end that that became kind of ugly actually and painful, and but I did ultimately leave, and that was probably the second best thing I ever did for my career, was leaving.
And what was the first?
Getting there.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy, 'cause that's the chapter, right? That is the chapter on Snuff, the good and the bad. And man, I
Right.
love that because you were there 13 years, so it was clear to me that there was a
It was
lot of
actually 10. It was actually 10.
okay,
10
so
years
10
in.
total, right? So,
Mhm.
but there were a lot of concessions you must have made over those 10 years because, like you said in the book, he was very controlling, wasn't much of a musician, if at all, and tried to take credit for a lot of things that not just you, but other people under him were doing at the time. That had to be tough as a young creative person, right?
Yeah, but to be honest, it was part of the game then. Producers that weren't musicians or writers would take pieces of songs. Um, it just, the Donnie Kirshner's and the Wes Farrells and the producers of the day that were really businessmen. Not only would they take publishing, but they would try to take pieces of the writer's share.
Mm.
And I didn't know any different. I just thought, okay, well, that's the way the business works. So I guess I'll go along with it. And it wasn't until later that I realized that that really is a no-no. And of course, today, in today's business, nobody really does that anymore. Um, But so those were kind of the setbacks, and it was, I made a ton of money for him,
Mm.
um, over the years. He published all my hits, and, uh, you know, uh, so it was time for me to go out on my own, and that was a gamble. I was nervous to do that, um, and also I had to overcome the stigma of being Snuff Garrett's guy,
Right,
which Leon Russell was before me,
right.
um, and I found out later on that Leon left for the same exact reason I did.
Yeah, it seemed likely for that. Yeah, you don't realize what somebody is dealing with until you're dealing with it yourself, right? Um, so your evolution process up till now is New York and then Atlanta and then L.A. So what are some lessons that you took from each of those stops along the way that you still kind of lean on today?
Well, New York, I was a kid and I was just writing songs, and I think the best thing about my New York experience was Herb Bernstein, who
Mhm.
was a great arranger. I picked up a lot of things by listening to him. Atlanta was more of a laboratory proving ground in the studio, learning how to make demos, learning how to be a better songwriter. Um, but LA is where I learned the business, um, and I was there for 40 something years, and got to play and work with the best of the best. Um, and so you can't help but pick up some good things from those guys, uh, and I still do I do what I do. I don't try to do what other people do because I'm really best at doing what I do
Mhm.
and staying true to what I do. And whether that whether that's old fashioned or not relevant at some time, maybe it is, maybe so, but you can't be someone you're not.
Yeah, I don't know who it was that said it, but somebody a lot smarter than me said, "Be yourself. Nobody's as good at that as you are."
Right.
So
That's true.
yeah, for
That's
sure.
true.
So one of the things that it's apparent to me, I'm still caught up on the Snuff chapter here, is he kind of introduced you as a young creative mind to some people that you idolized growing up. I'm talking about Roy Rogers, who was your first cut for Snuff, and then later on Merv Griffin. You were able to meet him as well. Did you? Man, what's the question here? I guess that as a young person now, are you really throwing a lot of weight behind Snuff now because he made some of these things happen for you?
Um, I'm indebted to him.
Yeah.
Uh, I still, acknowledge that if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be who I am in this business. And yet, there were some things that went on during those 10 years that forced me to have to leave. And I'm more grateful that I left when I left
Mm. So when
because I was able to really become not so much in his shadow, but become my own person.
so when you get that cut from Roy Rogers, what's the euphoria like there, man? I can't even imagine what that's like.
Well, well, the thing about, I was in Hollywood shock when I was that first year out there. Snuff knew everybody.
Yeah.
He would he would go to dinner with Jerry Lewis and Sonny Bono and Cher and uh, all these people that I idolized as a kid, and growing up, and so I was like a kid in a candy store,
Mhm.
and then he was gracious enough to involve me in all of that, and uh, Tony Anthony Newley, which was one of the highlights, one of the when people say what's the greatest experience you ever had, half the people I mentioned Anthony Newley to don't even know who he was. But to me, he was one of the greatest songwriters and one of the greatest performers ever. So, and I got to do a record with him, Tom Jones, Engelbert Humperdinck. It was like a dream, dream come true.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially as a young guy. But like, man, what awesome memories. Let's change gears just a bit. I wanted to talk about instrumentation in the arranging and producing side of things. Now, you are a pianist, obviously a composer and stuff. But when you're arranging and engineering projects, you have to have, I would imagine, at least a rudimentary knowledge of how other instruments work. How does that, from your perspective as an engineer and as a piano player, how do you know how to add what pieces to where in a
Okay,
production?
well, first off, I want to correct you.
Okay,
I am not an engineer or recording engineer.
okay.
I like to refer to myself as a pretengineer. Um, the- uh, but- and my friends laugh at me because if one button is out of place, I'm done for. I have to call my dad. No, I don't mix. I'm a keyboard player composer who has studied my entire life since I'm a kid on my own the instruments of the orchestra because I was fascinated
Mhm.
by orchestrations. When I used to listen to records as a kid, I would tune out the song and the singer and just listen to what the violins were doing or what the woodwinds were doing or what the brass was doing. So the love of putting those musical puzzles together with the instruments of the orchestra, um, it came as natural to me as breathing.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Obviously, the instrument that I play on is a piano or keyboards, and so, but I'm always hearing what everybody else is going to be doing.
So, I mean, hearing it doesn't. I mean, being able to hear it doesn't change because you can play or not play the instrument. It's just about studying, so to
Not at
speak,
all. Right,
repetition.
not at all. I just instinctively know what I want the strings to do, what I want the oboe to do, what I want the guitars to do. I just know that when I'm writing the song, I'm hearing the complete thing in my head.
That's really cool. As far as genres go with instruments as well, because you've written and composed for certainly many different genres, is that kind of the same thing? Like just having a, studying it in memory and just figuring out which genres really heavily involve which instruments? Like with country music, it's fiddle and pedal steel, bluegrass,
I,
mandolin, things like that.
I think that the finished song, kind of dictates that to me. Um, Obviously, I'm not going to put a whole lot of brass on a country
Right.
song or an oboe or a French horn. And I'm not going to put a pedal steel on a comedic film I'm scoring. So I think every song or every project dictates to what the band is going to be.
But it's funny because I interviewed Randy Edelman after you, and he always talked about like when he's writing the score for a film, he doesn't write comedy. He just writes a theme, and because he feels like if they asked him to write comedy, then the actors in the movie are not doing their job.
Right. No, yeah, and Randy's great at that. Randy and I are old friends, and I pretty much do the same thing when I'm working on a film or a television thing. I create a theme that I think is the arc of the piece, and then it's theme and variations. Because if it's a good theme, you can do it in a minor mode for sadness. You can do it in a happily uplifting mode for light romantic comedy, and then maybe even create a song out of it for
Mhm.
an end title.
So essentially, music is an accessory to film at most times. But are there times when music is not the accessory, but is really the main theme of a film?
Well, I don't know about well, certainly if you don't want to watch Jaws without John Williams'
Of course
score.
not. Yeah, right.
Um, the music is a great enhancement of what the story is. I mean, you can't replace what the story is.
Right.
Um,
That's a much better word than accessory, than enhancer, right? Yeah, I can see that. So let's switch gears again. We didn't talk about musical theater at all in the first episode, and this is really your first love. And you have, correct me if I'm wrong, you have written some, I guess they call it plays or screenplays. I'm talking about Josephine and Pure Country. Can you update us on what these were or are?
yeah, well, actually, I have a new show that's kind of leapfrogged over. Josephine was a great show, great musical that I wrote with John Bettis, but unfortunately, we just couldn't get the right stars to line up. And with musical theater, everything's got to line up from the right producer to the right theater to timing is you know um, it's just the hardest thing in show business to make it to the stage. I am working on a piece right now that we're in development on, and that we're actually going to open next year. It's called "Say Goodnight." It's the love story of George Burns and Gracie Allen,
Oh wow,
and it's a wonderful, wonderful piece written by Rick Hawkins, who wrote the book and the story, and John Bettis and I have written the score, and it's 22 songs in it, and hopefully we'll be on stage towards the end of 25.
amazing.
And uh, Pure Country, another kind of situation that just didn't work out business wise. So we're evaluating. We own the music, and so we're evaluating what to do with those songs, and maybe create a new piece utilizing some of those songs.
Yeah, I think Pure Country would be really, really cool on stage. Like Grease is in kind of that fashion, Like I think Grease is amazing on screen, but it's also amazing live on stage. I'd love to see that from a Pure Country standpoint. Um, in the writing of the music or the presentation of the music between theater and film, what are the major challenges that you face with theater versus film?
Theater's kind of its own animal, its own vernacular. I approach the demos to the songs, the theater songs, using actor voices and actor singers, as opposed to when I'm demoing a song for an artist to record, just a pop song. Who then I'll either do it myself or have uh, a great studio singer, pop singer, or country singer come in and sing the demo. With songs for theater, um, I'd like to cast it for however many voices are going to sing the songs, and use those same artists or singers on the different songs. So when you listen to the score in its entirety, um, you get a sense of what the story is, and who the characters are.
Is it more? Do you feel like the music is more of an enhancer, obviously, in a musical versus a film? I would think it would be, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. In a musical, it's all about the musical.
Yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, they'd call it a topical. You know.
Exactly. One thing we alluded to a little bit in the first episode was in your when your book was written and published, you had not moved to Nashville yet. So there was a lot of discussion in the book about how, you had all of these Nashville hits from outside of Nashville. And we talked a little bit about your perspective in that. and whether that helped you or not in the first episode. My question is now that you are in Nashville and you're kind of more, closely attuned to kind of the scene there. Looking back, do you think that being in Nashville would have helped you more or less than being in LA at the time?
No, I think LA was the place for me because I was heavily involved in television music and film music, as well as records. Um, when I moved here, uh, I pretty much put television on the back burner, and I also thought that, well, out of sight is out of mind, and if I'm not in Hollywood, I'm probably not going to get too many calls to score movies,
Right.
and it's been kind of just the opposite. I've last year I did 4 films. I'm doing 2 right now, coming up and starting the new year. So that's been great. And writing pretty cool songs that are getting recorded. So I just do what I do and hope somebody salutes.
Do you think the internet? I mean, this is probably an obvious question, but do you think the internet has helped you in where location really doesn't matter quite as much anymore, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Um, it's just made everything more instantaneous. I can get a song to a producer in Los Angeles in a matter of minutes. Um, I can do an arrangement or do an overdub on somebody if they just send me files. I can score a movie right here in my own studio
Mhm.
and bring players in. Um, yeah, the internet's been incredibly helpful in connecting people quickly. Um,
How do you maintain that passion? Because you said you're still working on films. You've done over 100, I imagine, films at this point, probably a couple hundred. But you're still doing them. So how do you maintain that passion for that kind of work?
I just love the process. I love the creative process, and that's something you don't retire from. It's not like you get bored of it. Every project is different. Every song is different. Every sound sound of what I'm doing is going to be I try to make different. So it's all still very fresh for me,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that question because prior to us talking today, just for future reference so people can know what I'm referencing, Bill Belichick was named the head coach of the University of North Carolina today. And
I saw that.
I think he's 78 years old. And one of the questions the reporter asked him is, why do you still want to coach? And his answer was, man, because it beats working.
I'm just surprised he didn't go to a pro team. I
Yeah,
really
I think honestly, I think he's being blackballed, Steve. I think the NFL is for whatever reason not allowing him in the club anymore.
Now are you in Boston?
I'm actually in Texas, Northeast Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I grew up and born and raised in New England, so like Boston, Mass, and so all my
So
allegiances are to those
is
teams.
Boston your first name?
It is not. It's I obviously when I moved to Texas, I've been here 23 years now, but I talked funny when I got here, obviously. So they all started calling me Boston Chris, and it just stuck.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and so then
Um,
over time, I've done a lot of different things: karaoke host, professional wrestler, and everything I've ever done. Boston Chris was a perfect stage name. So there you go.
wow, cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I was a big Patriots fan all during the Belichick Brady era. So being from New York, I'm still a Yankees fan. So
Wow.
yes,
A Yankees Patriots fan. They do exist.
yeah, yeah,
Oh man.
yeah.
So you agree with me that Tom didn't deflate those balls, right?
No,
Yeah.
no
Ridiculous,
way.
man. Ridiculous. Anyway, let's talk about family a little bit. I know that you have obviously multiple children and all of them are so stinking talented in their own right. That's going to be really cool, right? As a dad, just to see how talented and driven your children are.
Yeah, it really is. It's uh, it's just, it's just something that I guess is in the genes, as they say.
Yeah, and yeah, obviously, Andrew was a fabulous writer in his own right, and Stephen is uber creative person as well. How much of that do they get from their dad, do you think?
Oh, well, knowing their mom, I think about 99%. So,
Oh, that's amazing. Uh,
yeah.
uh, Here's a question for you: is there a movie out there or movies that you wish you had written a score for?
Oh, yeah. Oh, tons, tons. Um, I mean, I love the music that was done for them, but uh, Schindler's List comes to mind. What was that great basket? Hoosiers uh, with Gene Hackman. I loved that score. That was Jerry Goldsmith. Um, the Notebook.
Oh, great film.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big movie fan, so when I'm watching a movie, I'm listening to the movie as much as I'm.
That's awesome because you just led me into my next question that just popped into my brain. So obviously the way you watch a movie is going to be completely different than the way I watch a movie because you're a composer, you're a score writer and all of that. Do you watch a film, and obviously I'm not going to ask you for a specific example of this, but do you watch a film and just hear something that's so wrong in your mind creatively that you just gasp like, "Oh my God, what are they doing there?" And does that ruin a movie for you?
I've Yeah, I mean, generally the movies that I go to see are really good movies. I know,
Yeah.
but I have gone to a few that where I've gone, not only about the music, but about the writing, the screenwriting, and the directing. And
Yeah.
you go, what? How did this get made? You
Yeah.
know?
And you immediately just run to the credits to see who did that. Like, oh my God, who did that? I can't imagine, dude. Like, just watching something that, from your perspective, would be so different than mine because I think a lot of us consumers of film and TV, we take the music for granted, right? It's just it's there, and you don't realize it's not there until it's not there, right? Because there are those movies too where you're like, man, there probably should have been music there, and there wasn't. Um, but yeah, it's just interesting stuff. Were there throughout your career, were there some successes that you had, whether it was songs or movies or relationships or whatever, that were truly unexpected to you?
Hmm. I was thrown into certain situations. I'd get a call to do an arrangement or write something for someone, and or someone was cutting my song where I didn't know the person, and then we became friends along the way. But I can't really think of a one example. I think it's just an extension of networking
Yeah,
over the years, and some have become good friends, and some you never see again, you know.
creatively speaking, from the side of content, like were there songs that you were like, man, I don't think this is going to be any good, and then they just blew up?
I've had a couple of those
Yeah,
that I was quite surprised. Coca-Cola Cowboy comes to mind, that Mel Tillis
right.
had a gigantic hit with. Uh, we wrote that as a joke.
Really?
We didn't even think it was going to be a song. It was like it was a joke. And and Sandy Pinkard, who I wrote it with, had this kind of silly chorus, and he played it for me, and I just started playing on the piano, wrote the verse, we finished it, and he played it for Snuff Garrett, who said, "I'm putting this in Every Which Way But Loose. We'll cut it with Mel Tillis." And I thought, really, and and it became this monster hit. So you just never know. And then I wrote a song for Ray Charles and Clint Eastwood for
Barbara
Any
Brothers.
Which Way You Can, called Beers to You,
Yeah,
which
Beers
I
to
thought
You,
was
yeah.
the worst song. It is the worst song I've ever written. I was forced to write it. I thought the title was horrendous, and I thought the song was bad, and I was embarrassed to put my name on it, but Snuff made us cut it, and it was just a bomb, and and so whenever anybody brings that up or says, "Hey, can you play a little Beers to You?" I go, "No." So
That's the one time you wish Snuff took credit for the whole thing, right? Oh man. So one name that did not come up in the first episode with you was Barbra Streisand, and I definitely wanted to chat with you about her because I know that she was obviously somebody you looked up to growing up as well. Um Tell us about the experience working with or for her throughout the years.
Well, I'm happy to say she's just recorded a sixth song of mine
Wow.
as a duet with Tim McGraw,
Hmm.
and it'll be featured on her new album coming out, I think around Valentine's Day. And uh, she's like nobody else, you know. I mean, there's levels of celebrity and talent, and then there's the absolute top echelon, like the Beatles or Muhammad Ali uh, or Barbara Streisand.
Hmm.
There's just one. The minute you hear the voice, the minute the first note comes out, you know who it is. Um, and just very blessed to have had one song recorded by her, let alone six. So nothing like it.
Is it still surreal to you to hear those iconic voices on something that you wrote? It's got to be, right?
Oh, totally, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one is just blows my mind how great it is, and the vocals, both Tim and Barbara, just completely killed it.
So I haven't heard it, and I have goosebumps right here. If you guys can see that,
Yeah, nobody will hear it until it comes out. It's under lock and key. But it's been like that for me. Christopher Cross comes to mind when Christopher and I did Swept Away. Um, the minute you hear Christopher Cross, you just bingo. You
Mhm.
know who it is. Michael McDonald, same way. Just unmistakable. B.J. Thomas was that way. And I got to work with all of them, so um, it's I'm constantly pinching myself.
I can imagine. Probably have to apply salve daily, right? So one of your current projects, this will be one of the last things we talk about, Steve. I appreciate your time again for this. Um, just such an interesting guy, and what a career. But one of your current projects is with Whisperin Bill Anderson. Speaking of iconic voices and songwriters, the project is called Forevermore, and it features three of the world's best songwriters, in my opinion, and that's you, Bill Anderson, and Bobby Tomberlin. And so this project, I listened to it on repeat for the last couple of weeks. It's a very reflective project, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, Bill is that one of a kind artist too.
Hmm.
Um, he There's actually more talk singing than there is pure singing.
Right.
And so in designing, not only writing the songs with Bill, which I wrote five of the six, um, but in designing the songs and then producing them, uh, you have to, or I had to keep in mind the limitations of the range, the vocal range, and and the kinds of songs that fit him as an artist.
Hmm.
He's a great writer, and Bill has written great songs, very melodic songs for other singers.
Yes.
But because this was going to be a Bill Anderson project, um, we had to keep the songs within a parameter of what would be believable coming out of his voice.
Right.
And I think we did that. I think we, it's really, really cool stuff we
It's a
did.
great record. I love it so much. One of those songs on there is definitely going to be something my wife and I really hold on to a lot. But also, we talked in the first episode of how blessed you have been as a composer of melodies to have some of the greatest lyricists known to man as partners. And Bill Anderson obviously is right up there on my list of great lyricists. Um, Man, it had to be such a pleasure working with not just Bill, but some of the world's greatest word people, right?
Yeah, well, oh yeah, I mean, Marty Panzer, John Bettis, Eric Kaz, Paul Williams. Um, it's it's a whole different thing when you're working with wordsmiths
Hmm.
like like them. They just have this way of writing poetic truth in song form, and that's hard to find.
You've always said that your weakness has been the words in music, but having worked with some of the best lyricists ever, do you feel like that weakness has been shored up?
Yes, I do. I've learned a lot from them,
Yeah, I can
from all of
imagine.
them.
So, to wrap this up, Steve, what else do you have going on? I know you're not busy at all, right?
Well, I just started a film called The Legend of Van Dorn. It's set in the Civil War. It's a really cool, true story about a general from Mississippi, and it's a love story. And so I'm excited about that. It'll hopefully be out next summer, um, and I'll be working on that mostly in January and February. Um, the Streisand Tim McGraw duet coming in February, I believe. Uh, and then I just wrote a really great song with Brad Paisley that I'm excited about, and we're hoping Brad records that, and it's really a cool song.
Another
So
great
I'm excited.
lyricist.
Yeah, Brad's great.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. So, are you still getting calls to get this stuff done 2 weeks ago yesterday?
Oh yeah, yeah. But nowadays I just say, well, I'll get to it when I get to it. So,
I
but
understand.
I'm good about deadlines. I enjoy the pressure of deadlines. I know myself, and if I don't have somewhat of a deadline, I'll procrastinate.
Hmm. Well, Steve, thank you so much again. Not just for one interview, but two. Just thank you so much, man. It's good to be your friend, and I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you.
Yes, your questions are always great, and it's really fun to talk to you anytime you let me know.
I absolutely will, Steve. I hope everything just keeps popping off for you. I hope you get 72 more #1 hits, and
Thank
I hope you can
you.
finally get that Emmy award too. By God.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you have a Merry Christmas and good holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.
Same to you, man. You have a good one.
All right, buddy.
All right, bye
Bye.
bye.
Hey, folks, I'm Ray Weaver, and thanks for tuning in to the Boston Chris Show.
It's time to jam.